This whole thing about taking everything so personally, you have a choice in how you want to receive what you hear. Even if it does come from judgment, who the fuck cares? When you can develop that level of detachment, that's when you can really be in the world. I lived for a long time with just like a tornado of thoughts spinning around in my head, not aware that that tornado was actually something that I had some control over. Hi, I'm Sarah Schmidt. I'm 52 years old, and I can honestly say that I have never felt better. For the first 50 years of my life, I navigated some pretty fucking hard things that I like to call my Holy Schmidt moments. They include things like being diagnosed with cancer, navigating my sexuality, adopting children, two divorces, losing my dad, and having a biological child in my 40s. After decades of some really, really hard work, I have fallen deeply in love with myself and my life. Turns out that embracing the magic and the expansion that comes with getting older, it isn't a bad place to start. I'm here to prove that life doesn't have to decline with age. In fact, it gets a whole lot better. On Holy Schmidt, we are going to dive into my curiosities around wellness and longevity and mindset. And we are going to do it with really vulnerable, thoughtful conversations with people that I really love and admire. This season, we are going to celebrate and honor growth and transformation and find profound beauty in connection. Welcome to the show. If you followed last season's episodes and got to the end, you know that spring and summer of 2024 were super challenging for me. In the process of going through some really, really tough stuff, though, I learned a ton about myself, my own resilience, my own capacity, my own ability to manage, to handle, to withstand, to excel in difficult times. I really dialed it in on all levels of the way I was living. And I discovered a couple key things that make me most resilient. I call these things my stress kit. And in this episode today, Grace and Jessica and I sit down to talk about it. What is it? What are the things? And we are going to hone in on what I think is maybe the most important thing I learned this year. Mindset. How I think creates everything that's happening in my life. We want to take you through our own process of how we manage our own mindset as life continues to roll with all of its wonderful challenges and all of its gifts. So I invite you today to join us and learn a little bit about how you too can adopt a mindset that allows for all the freedom, all the joy, all the pleasure, all the good things, how you can live the life you want. You know, I was thinking this morning and I was talking to Peter Crone about this, and we were talking about the importance of separating an event from the emotions surrounding it. You know, and so often we get just swept up into the emotions of an event and they become kind of one and the same. But then he challenged me to think a little deeper about the difference between feelings and emotions. And this was something I actually never really thought about before. But from his perspective, feelings are like that instant kind of natural, beautiful human response, like grief. Mm-hmm. When this helicopter that we were in landed at the top of this mountain in Iceland, and we got out and the boys were like making snow angels, and I just climbed up to like a peak because I just thought it looked beautiful and I wanted to like look over the edge, and I literally started to cry. Like it was this moment of like, holy fuck, the world is so gorgeous. How did I get to this little spot right here that I get to see it and experience it? It was just amazing. It was like that's a feeling. You know, and from his perspective, emotions are more the reactions. It's the ego's interpretation of the feeling, the reaction.
Right. Yeah, to layer onto that, I wonder if the emotion is more related to trauma. It's more your conditioned response to a stimulus versus the feeling is your authentic experience of a situation, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true, because what is the ego, right? The ego is all the little layers that make up who we are. And so one of the things I was just really thinking about was how this week with Will in the hospital, one thing I've been able to do is really separate the emotions and the events. And also, I've been more in my feeling state and less in the emotions, like not so much swept up by it. Like, it's an event. Yeah. But it does me no good to get super worked up by it. Like, I think one of my superpowers that I've developed is the ability to stay in this kind of in the reality of what actually is. Not like I'm not worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm really not. I'm really taking it like a day at a time. I mean, it's so funny. We take him to the hospital and then you just like worry, 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 worry. But you're in a place where there's all these people that their job is to take care of him or you. The worrying adds nothing. That adds no benefit at all. It's just the mind's attempt to control the situation.
I thought that's really interesting. And I want to kind of go back to what you said too, Sarah, of the feelings versus emotions. Because one thing I'm also kind of picking up on or noticing how much of our emotional waves are about thoughts that we had versus the perceived reality that's in front of us in this very moment. And they become one and the same. Like being with Will in the hospital in that moment, scary. But the scariest thing is the what if, is the what's going to happen in the future, what's going to happen here. But if you just sit with the emotion of like, how does it feel that he's in the hospital? Well, he's getting care. People are attending to him. Like, can you sit with the presence of the emotion instead of running into the what if, which gives you a whole different emotional state?
Yeah. I really feel like our emotions are caused by our reactions.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I don't want to live in a way in which I'm reacting to everything around me.
Right.
That's been this overarching goal of the last, just few months even, of just trying to be grounded in what is like really my essence, I've talked about like being the rock in the river. That's like just is. No matter what's going on in the river, that rock just is. It doesn't change shape. It doesn't change form. It doesn't move. It doesn't, whether the water flows or not, whether it's raining or snowing. I mean, it just is a rock. Like that's really what been a goal of mine, is to just be who I am in all circumstances, in all seasons.
Mm-hmm. One thing I chatted Jess about, I think on Sunday, is the difference between emotionals and non-emotionals in human design. And Sarah, you and I are emotionals and Jess is a non-emotional. And basically what that means is, in your little human design chart, the emotional center is colored in for us and it's open for Jess. So every day we wake up, the universe like throws us a mood for the day, and that's just the mood for the day. And we're supposed to be able to like feel into that without feeling like it has to do with the outside world. So if you wake up in a sour mood, like instead of being like, it's because my cleaning lady, or it's because of this situation, or I need to dump someone, you're supposed to be like, no, this is just my mood for the day. And that's all separate. And I woke up in a sour mood on Sunday and I felt like everything was wrong and stupid and blah, blah, blah. What's my purpose? What am I even doing? And I had a great day. And by the end of the day, I was like, that was ridiculous. Like, thank God I didn't take any action on it, tell anyone how I was feeling, or like make any drastic changes, because I don't even feel that way. And so I chatted Jess and I was like, does this happen to you? Like, as a non-emotional, do you wake up like this? Like, do you yo-yo so hard? And she was like, no, not really, unless like you guys come to the table with a hard emotion and then I feel it. So that's another interesting layer of the whole thing.
Oh, that is super interesting.
It's fascinating because emotionals and non-emotionals like almost pair up on purpose. Because if an emotional is around a non-emotional, he can kind of regulate their wave. And then a non-emotional is like kind of like when I'm by myself, my mood is neutral. I'm just like, oh, okay, I can see things neutrally. Nothing really sways me. It's when I interact with other people or other things or like social media, I'm like, oh, we should be worried about this. And then suddenly I'm worried about it. But in my own natural state, I'm not worried about it. And my partner is emotional. And so I can tell when I'm like, oh, I'm totally taking on his emotions and what he's going through in the moment. good or bad. Sometimes if he's in a great mood, I'm like, we're in the best mood ever, like, and that feels amazing. But it is interesting to notice, like, okay, what emotions are mine and what emotions am I picking up because I am connected to all these people who are going through a wave.
Right. And not making them your identity either. Like not attaching to something and being like, because I'm down, I'm depressed, or because I'm down, I hate everything. Instead, it's like really letting them pass and seeing what you're left with, and then when you're left with like, that's the stuff you take action on, because it's not charged anymore. It's just sort of like your reality.
I think this is like a totally fascinating way of thinking about it, because this whole piece, like a tenet of the stress kit, the how we think, is so related to how we feel. And I think we often don't make that connection, that I have some power over what happens with these feelings of mine. My perspective on them really matters. My understanding of them.
So, okay, for anyone tuning in for the first time, or this is, one of the first times we're sharing this on the podcast, but Sarah, one of the things I think you do exceptionally well, it is also in your human design, but sort of this like crisis expert. When shit hits the fan, Sarah is the person to call to ground you back down to earth and be like, what do I do here? And she just has the protocol for you, or she's like, well, we can do this. And one concept we're like, okay, how do we support people in becoming their own sort of resilient selves, that when shit hits the fan, because it always does, we're human, how do we respond to it differently? What do we need to be doing in the non shit hitting the fan times that we can actually take care of ourselves from the best of our ability? And you came up with this concept of a stress kit and what we turn to. So what is it? How do you utilize it? It's just kind of how you live now.
Yeah.
But if we were to break it down for someone who isn't living from that way, what would you say?
I think the analogy of like, when's the right time to go to therapy is a good one just to use as an example here. Most people wait to go to therapy until there's something really, really, really big happening that they can't manage and it feels like out of control and they want to seek somebody's help, right? They're in crisis, they go to therapy. Most of that is really crisis management. Like the true work, therapy, let's say / healing work, it's hard to do that when you're in the crisis state. So if you're having like a huge argument with your partner or your best friend or your parent or your child, there's very little progress, understanding, healing that can happen in the midst of the argument, the crisis. That's going to happen later, right? In the quieter moment when you can process, when you can work through things, when you're a little more rational. Like for me, my ability to handle stress is cultivated. That muscle is cultivated. It's built in the moments when I'm not experiencing stress. So I'm thinking about, what do I need to do in this relatively calm moment, right? Or period of my life that is going to help me better handle the waves that are coming, because they're inevitable. I mean, if you love people, if you're a parent, if you have coworkers, like if you live in a climate, you're gonna have stressors, right? And for me, my ability to handle it is directly related to what I do on the days when I am not experiencing stress. And I feel like the more discipline I have around that, the better I handle the days when I'm experiencing stress. And it's become like a non-negotiable. And I call that like my stress kit. And I don't want people to think that it's something I put in place when I am stressed. It is the thing I do every day so that I can be my best, most resilient self in the stressful state.
It makes me think about like expanding your window of tolerance for stress. Like I haven't really put two and two together, but that's really what it is. It's like your capacity to handle stress, if you're not taking care of these buckets, is going to be really small. So when that life stressor hits you, you're going to have a hard time having the capacity to metabolize it, to understand, to get back to baseline, to have a rational thought and not a big reaction. But if you can do these other things to support yourself when that stressor hits, you're like, oh, I love the quote that you said, Sarah. You're like, I lifted like 90 pounds this morning. Come on, world, let's go. Like, I can take on anything at this point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that kind of backs a study that Huberman talked about of like when you do that hard thing, it expands your ability for hard things. And in fact, boosts all this like supportive neural architecture in your brain as well.
100%.
Another thing I was thinking about as you were talking is I think the word stress feels inherently negative and the word hard feels negative, but they're not necessarily negative states. And I think the more you have this sort of stress kit mindset, it's like you're always in preparation, but not in a worry state and more of a loving preparation. The more things come up, and you just glide through them. You just handle them. And you're not even thinking this is hard or this is so stressful or, oh, woe is me, I wish this would go away. I wonder like if you just move through and then you're like, oh my God, I just handled that. And I wasn't even thinking too much about it. Like in your experience, Sarah, what does it feel like to move through one of those situations now?
It's life. It's just, I'm living my life. I mean, I fully expect stressful moments to come at any given point during any given day or week. I mean, I think I used to worry about things that might happen, right? And I would spend a lot of energy trying to figure out how to prevent them. And then enough shit hits the fan and you recognize like, I can't really keep it from hitting the fan. So maybe I'll just change the way I'm looking at this, and I honestly I just expect it to show up so that I'm not surprised by it. I mean, and sometimes it's really, really big stuff. I mean, I had a kid in the hospital and we were talking about maybe having to move him to the ICU this week. I mean, I'm not talking about like stubbing my toe or getting a fender bender, or even slightly bigger things like, losing a job I don't know what's more stressful than your child in the hospital in a life-threatened situation. Right? But this week, as it was happening, I remained really incredibly calm and I felt very peaceful. In fact, even to the point where people were asking me if I was okay, and I was starting to question if I was really okay because I wasn't having a big emotional reaction to it. I mean, I felt a lot of feelings around it, but I wasn't reacting to it. I was like, yeah, I actually am okay. Is it okay that I'm okay? Because I recognize that the average human in this situation wouldn't be okay. And we wouldn't judge them for that. And yet I've had so many moments like this in my life that I don't want to not be okay when stress is hitting me. I don't like it. I don't like that feeling of just being so worked up and like I'm being blown around by the winds of like a tornado. It certainly isn't helpful in helping me handle any of the situations. So I think I like what you said, Grace, about we've given the word stress and hard, and these are not positive words. Well, I don't know, but love them or hate them, like they're part of life. The longer you live, there are things that are going to be difficult because life is challenging. If you're really living your life, it is hard. And so I like how so many people are talking about, I mean, Gabrielle Lyon talks about this, like, let's just change our perspective on stress. If you are living a big life, a big full life, you are going to have stress in your life. It's how you think about it, or if you want to get comfortable with how difficult things can be, get uncomfortable as much as possible. Like discomfort. How do we get comfortable being uncomfortable? I think we have every opportunity, particularly in the United States, to like try to avoid discomfort at all costs, right? It's too cold, turn up the heat. It's too hot, turn on the air. I'm too hungry, go get a snack. There's 900,000 options right on the corner, or Uber it over,
Order
or
something on Amazon.
yeah. I ran out of my, collagen powder. I can get it by 4:00 delivered by a drone, like I never have to want for anything. I don't have to be uncomfortable. I mean, this is a big problem, I think, because if you're really living your life and you're really loving hard, you are going to find yourself in lots of uncomfortable situations and you're not going to know what to do.
Well, and it doesn't prepare you for any of that. I forget what clip it was, but I was watching, I think it was Dr. Becky Good Inside. And she was saying that you get entitled kids by solving their problems for them and not allowing them to experience the discomfort of whatever situation. It's a natural instinct to want to be like, oh, you stubbed your toe. Okay, let's get ice and let's get, all the things like, oh, that friend was mean to you. Okay, cool. Let's invite 5 friends over and whatever.
Yeah. We never have to see them again.
Yeah. Screw that friend, cut them out of your life, whatever. And it's a loving instinct to want to take away that discomfort for them. But can you actually allow them to experience healthy discomfort so they know how to handle it, so they can prepare? And I think as a society, we're leaning more in that direction where everything's so comfortable that when things are uncomfortable, it's like, whoa, what is this? This is a very foreign sensation.
Yeah, I feel like this brings us back to so many conversations we've had around making time and space to feel your feelings. Because when you were giving the example of you at the hospital, Sarah, it didn't mean that you were just like spiritually bypassing the situation and had a big smile on your face. Like you probably had a lot of alone moments of feeling waves of terror or unhappiness or whatever, but it didn't affect your ability to deal with it. And you weren't showing up reactively or activated, right? And like you're saying, Jess, with the example with the kids, like we're not saying to completely inconvenience yourself, but like make an environment where kids are encouraged to sit in the uncomfortable feeling, like stubbing your toe. It's an uncomfortable feeling. Is that feeling any different than feeling offended? They're both just sensations in your body. So I'm wondering, Sarah, in your experience, how do you make dedicated space to feel your feelings so that you're not showing up in a reactive state?
I think when I first realized I needed to be more conscious about feeling my feelings and recognized I wasn't feeling them, I had to be much more structured about how I did it. It was like in the quiet of the morning, in a more meditative state, doing a body scan, having a sort of conversation with my parts. Maybe it was a morning meeting. It was very much like I'm going to do this now and I'm going to do it for 20 minutes and I'm going to do this every morning. Maybe I'll journal a little bit after. But now after having done that for quite some time, I recognize like I can do it on the fly. So more often than not, a feeling comes up and I sense it, right? I experience it. And then I quickly will do a like, oh my God, where is that feeling? I intentionally try to get out of my head about it. Because the minute I'm trying to think about my feelings, I become much more reactive. Because really the thinking is a judgment, or it's going to be a plan for how to resolve it. It isn't just going to be being in it, right? Because your brain wants to control it. Your brain doesn't feel it. So I'm going to try to get out of my head and into my body. And so instantly I'll be like, this happened to me the other morning. I woke up and I was feeling kind of sad and couldn't quite figure out why. And I noticed I was trying to search my mind for like the why I might be sad. And I quickly recognized that I was in my thinking mind. And I quickly said, wait, hold it, stop. Where am I feeling this sadness? And usually I feel strong emotions in my gut. But that day I felt it right here in my throat. And it was interesting because you guys were challenging me to do a little more on social media. And I was like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't know what word. I'm not feeling it. And that's what picked up on that morning is I felt this kind of tightness, this lump in my throat around the sadness I was feeling. And I just kind of like in that moment, I mean, I remember doing this. I was by my Berkey getting my water for the morning, my big cup of water that I drink first thing. And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. And then I just kind of like stretched it out a little bit. And then I did a little I massaged it a little bit. And I was like, what do you want to say? Like I was talking to it though, the feeling, not me. I was talking to the feeling. I thought, what do you want me to know? What am I missing here? I kind of personified it a little bit. And I had a little talk with the sadness. And all I heard was, could you just let me be? I just was like, okay, I just got to let it be. I mean, that first of all, that exercise 3 years ago, I've never been able to do it. Okay. And if I sensed any of I would have been like, I got to get away from this. This is like, it was so threatening. I felt so scared of those emotions, particularly sadness. That wasn't the one that was very hard for me. And it was just so interesting how that was just like a little blip. And all of that happened in about, I don't know, was it 30 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
Literally 30 seconds while I was getting a glass of water.
It's interesting how prophylactic I think feeling your feelings is, because if you're not feeling them in the small moments, they come at you in a really uncomfortable way. And I was talking to a friend who was struggling with weight loss, and she would look at herself and feel so disgusted and all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, could we uncouple the feeling from the weight? Could it be that you're just amazing, discomfort and disgust are here? This doesn't have to do with, my weight. It's just a feeling that I need to experience. And me experiencing this feeling is a step towards letting go of something that may be manifesting in weight or in something else. And I think the more you put off, feeling feelings in the easy time, the more they come in different costumes, that make it even harder for you to be let me stop and feel this feeling, because you're but I need to fix this. I need to go on the treadmill, or I need to do that. But it's never been about anything other than really feeling that feeling.
Well, and I think we so often talk about this in the sense of the negative emotions, right? Disgust, sadness, anger, resentment. But the reality is that if you're not feeling those emotions, you also aren't feeling the positive ones either, And I don't think there's a correlation of the more we let ourselves feel any emotion, the more we get to feel all emotions, right? The whole spectrum of things. So I don't think people expect that letting myself feel sadness might just usher in profound joy or satisfaction or, whatever, pleasure but we feel like we're shutting down. I want to get away from the negative emotions, but we don't recognize that when you shut one down, you shut them all down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a whole package deal. I don't think you can pick and choose. I only want to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, I'm not going to be sad. I promise you, your happiness is going to be less intense and less pleasurable in proportion to what you're not feeling on the other end of the spectrum.
100%. They're inextricably tied.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's really popping up for me very strongly between what both of you are saying is, Grace, in that example, the assumption that the emotion has to be tied to this thing. Mm-hmm. Can we separate the emotion? I love that you personify it, Sarah, because I think it makes it so much easier. You're I am just experiencing sadness. It's not, I'm sad because X. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a relation, but in order to actually feel the emotion, let's separate the emotion and let it be a sensation, a feeling in the body, something we're just moving through and experiencing in this moment versus, well, I'm only feeling this because of this result or this action. It's let's uncouple that for a second, because if we don't, we really can't get to the root of that emotion anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I've been working on doing that with physical sensations too. Even if you have a headache, we feel anxiety in such a bodily way, and we know, okay, I'm going to be with this feeling. A headache, it's like the same thing, it's just in a different spot. But instead, we want to like, oh, drink water, do this, do that. Yes, you may do those things, but first, like, could you be with it? And I had one experience where I really had a headache. I don't get them that much, but I just sat and I closed my eyes and I was just with the headache, and I just let the headache be there. And in seconds, just dissipated, it completely disappeared. And like all these sensations we feel, we're so quick to want to throw a solution at them, whether it's like yelling at someone, being reactive, like drinking water, trying to fix something. And I think what's interesting about the stress kit, and maybe ushering us to the new next portion of it, which is, how do you then take care of your body, is this is layer one, take care of the feeling, then move to the next space, which is like, and drink the water and have your element too, and whatever it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the other pillars, Sarah, of this stress kit? What can people start to think about?
I think the thinking piece, how you think, is just so fundamental, but they all work. For me, they all work in tandem. So when I think about what I do on a regular basis, on a daily basis, it's how I think, how I eat, how I sleep, how I move, how I breathe. Eat encompasses drink, eat and drink. But the think one for me it's the basis of it all.
It's like the Maslow's hierarchy. We got to get the first layer first. Yeah.
And I used to think that it was what I eat was the basis. The Sarah 1.0 thought that it was all about how I was nourishing my body. But really the mind, I think, having some, I'm going to say the word control over how you think, and understanding how you can think, how you can shift your thinking, right? I think is so fundamental and has been such a game changer for me. I haven't really changed anything about how I eat, sleep, move, or breathe in the last few years. It's the think piece that has shifted dramatically for me. So I feel like think is like the base of my triangle, and I've talked a little bit about how people like Peter Crone or Gabrielle Lyon have really influenced my way of thinking. I'm curious, what do you guys think about think?
I completely agree. It is the foundation, the mindset, how you choose to think about things is going to set the tone for so much in your life, how you respond to it, understanding where your automatic assumptions go versus where you want to be on the train and directive, even just adopting the belief system that, okay, hard things are good for me. When I do hard things, there is a positive benefit from doing them, like rewiring your thoughts around that. I like to come back to, with think, some of the practices I'll utilize is really challenging my limiting beliefs. The things that so quickly get sucked up in there, and then all of a sudden I'm operating from those assumptions, like, well, we can't do things in this way. And it's like, well, why can't we do things in this way? Just because it hasn't been done before, or just because it hasn't gone that way, or even a limiting belief of, well, I can't possibly, take rest in the middle of the day because nobody does that. That's not something that's societally conditioned to do. And then it's like, well, what do I need? What's my truth? I think coming back to that, internal family systems obviously is huge for challenging those belief systems. Obviously, you guys know I do the 2B magnetic work, therapy. I just think any belief system that challenges sort of the status quo, that challenges what is possible for you, if it feels like it's going in the direction of a limitation or a fear, I'm always very curious and like, okay, can we challenge that assumption? Can we challenge that thought? And maybe there's something so different, so nuanced that we didn't even know we could start believing and then acting from.
In my experience, there's layers. There's the thinking and the self-awareness, and then there's the being. And I've been really focused on the be part. Like, I think I've spent so much of my life in such high self-awareness, like seeing all the dynamics in the room, seeing every aspect of myself, like knowing what I did wrong and knowing what I could have done better, like, and just like constantly actually micromanaging my experience by like thinking about all the factors way too much. And I think I always had an inherent interest in self-help and spirituality. And I grew up with such a spiritual mindset where I was really trained to think about everything around us as an idea rather than like a tangible object. Like, what does the table represent, right? Community, stability, like what is life? Like it's not just life in body, it's life as consciousness, it's everything as life. And I was sort of like, having that understanding was so incredible because I didn't feel so attached to the thing as the manifestation of the idea, right? Like home isn't just a house. Home is an idea. We can access the concept of home wherever we are. It's an inside job. But in all of that thinking and awareness, I wasn't actually like feeling or being. I was just kind of like constantly seeing. And so a couple of years ago, I got connected with this coach who was really focused on the being. And when I started working with her, I started spewing out like, I know about this system and that one and manifestation, and this is a test and this, that, and the other. And I know this and that and God. And she was like, whoa, 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 no more of this thinking. Like, we just need to be. And so for me, the challenge was to move like past the chronic self-awareness and into the moment. And I think, that's kind of what we're talking about too, is like, how does it not just be a monkey mind reactive thinking? And how is it, a connection to self so that thoughts and feelings come from a rock in the river place and not just from like a micromanaging place. So I guess to sum it up, like I thought all that thinking was good because it was like spiritual and aware. But I think always coming back to your center on it has been what helps me feel generally more at peace too.
There's so many different ways, I think, to get to this place that we're talking about, which is, we're talking about freedom, right?
Yeah.
Freedom from these constraints that we inherently have, I don't know. A lot of mine, I was handed them, right? I was, given them. Like, you should think this way. You should want this. This is your goal. These are your aspirations. And finding freedom from all that, just ridiculousness, I think, is the ultimate. It's the ultimate.
It makes me think too of, I think part of my think bucket is connection to my truth. Like, what is true for me in sensation in the body? What is true for me in what I'm lit up by? What is true for me and what I have the energy for? What is true, like that feeling of, I can feel the pull or the push to say the thing that I know the person wants me to say, or agree with the thing I know the person wants me to agree with. But what is my truth? What am I checking in with? And how can I, sit with sensation or sit with the thought or then kind of act from that place of self-awareness and self-truth. And it's not always the cleanest, it doesn't always work out perfectly, but I think that is something that's been really intensely on my mind in the past few months, even just thinking like, how can I get more honest with myself on what my truth is and then be able to live from that place.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I found a sense of myself the most in observation versus in trying to figure it out. It's like in retrospect where I'm like, oh, I'm someone who does that, or I'm someone who says that or who likes that. Because I've personally struggled to like hone in or identify like maybe like the characteristics or the things that I stand for or the things that I like I feel like I'm ever evolving and it's such a moving target. And it's only in the evidence that you're like, oh, this is who I am. And I think this applies to so many things, because you might say you're someone who values health, but like, are you making healthy choices, right? Or you might say you're spiritual, but like, are you doing anything to tap in with spirit? And so it can be interesting to have your own sense of who you think you are and compare that with, how you're actually showing up and what you're saying and how you're feeling. And then, getting to a place where you can align the two and see yourself more clearly, I think is really interesting.
For a long time, I didn't actually recognize that this way of understanding my own mindset and the influence I can have over it, I didn't really get it, that was a discipline, just like everything else I was working on. It did not occur to me that, I don't know if it was just because I was so brain dominant, I was such a thinker that I didn't have a sense that I could actually exercise some influence and discipline over that also. I completely undervalued the role that this actually plays in how I do everything else. I lived for a long time with just like a tornado of thoughts spinning around in my head, while I was doing all these other things that I thought were so important that I do, but not aware that that tornado was actually something that I had some control over. I could influence. It's a relief, I feel like, to have a quiet mind and to experience what you guys are talking about, that being in your center, knowing who you are, acting from that place, having that clear sense. I really experience that when I'm around both of you. And I appreciate that in both of you very, very much. And I kind of marvel at it too, because I'm a little jealous that you're 20 years younger than I am. And you're really you're down the road. You're farther down the road than I was when I was in my 30s. And I, when I ask you a question or I, want to pick your brains, I know it's coming from a place of real clarity in you, probably 95% of the time. I feel that. I sense that in how you respond. It's a real gift to be in the presence of someone who responds that way, who isn't just giving you like the knee jerk, what you want to hear, make you feel good, which is, I think, more the norm.
Totally.
You can tell the difference, I bet.
Totally.
And I'm sure you've been on the
1000%.
receiving end of both.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who's very
1000.
grounded in themselves and responds to you, and someone who's just trying to say what they think you want to hear or what they need to hear themselves say.
I think the biggest way you can tell, and it's interesting noticing it in work settings, I feel like you can notice it the most, but someone who isn't afraid to disagree, because if you're going to be sharing your truth, it might not be the exact same path answer that the other person has. And it's like, can you still respond from your truth, from what you're witnessing, from your expertise from your brain? Can you share that? Because that mixed with, and what I found too, especially in our team, is like, I will share my truth, and that opens up a can of worms to a different kind of truth. And then Grace will share something else, and you'll share something else. And all of a sudden we've had the best idea we've ever had. But if one of us didn't show up truthfully, then we would never have gotten to that idea ultimately.
Right. Or with ego or motive is such a big deal. Like when somebody's coming at it from a like, I want my idea to be chosen, or I need to be heard right now, or I'm kind of using you to get something that I need, whether that's validation, recognition, feeling like I have the floor or feeling like I'm valuable. It doesn't really land. And that's what leaves people with kind of like a weird taste in their mouth. But you can disagree with somebody and push back and like piggyback off people's ideas and say things in a tone of voice that's direct and not flowery and whatever, without it feeling mean, if it's not coming from a charged place. And I remember the other day, Jess, we were talking about like some email strategy thing, and I was fervently like, no, I think it needs to be this way. And I wasn't like thinking I wanted to choose my idea. But then after we got off the phone, I was like, gosh, like I'm so direct. Like could that have been a good idea? Like, why am I so intense? And I really got to thinking about it. But in the moment, that was just like my authentic reaction.
Yeah.
And like, we've all worked together enough to know, like, this is all coming from a good place. Like, and if ultimately the conclusion is something else, nobody's going to feel hurt about it,
That's
And so,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it's like there's so much value in bringing your truth, because it doesn't feel like you're trying to get something from each other, or like you're going to be in a big discrepancy if it doesn't work out in somebody's own way.
You can see how that relates to even like family dynamics, friend dynamics. I mean, if everyone feels safe, if there's an environment of safety and support that you all can show up as your true selves, and we are in support of that, we are here to listen to what you have to say from that place. I mean, really, I think what we're talking about here is when we have that internal experience of compassion for all of our internal craziness that's going on, we have the space to sit with other people's. We have the compassion to sit with other people's, which is really how you handle stressful situations. Like a disagreement doesn't have to be a stressful situation. It could just be a disagreement. Like it can be like, okay, well, we had two different perspectives. That's okay. It doesn't change anything. We're all good. We want the best solution, whatever that looks like.
It's that separation that we started talking about, separation of the ego from reality and what is. And once you practice that on a regular basis, it's incredibly freeing. Incredibly freeing. Because you can be who you are and I can be who I am, and we just get to be.
So cool. Yeah. And I think also, there's a safe space without judgment if everybody's committed to showing up in the same way. If one person's not totally, doing it, then that's the person who's like looking and judging. I think there's a fine line between like seeing and discernment and being able to be in a situation and maybe see what could be improved. Like when we work together and we're like, oh, like, maybe this episode could have been a little bit better, or maybe you could stand this way or say this in a different way. It's not coming from a judgmental place. It's coming from an all wanting the best possible outcome place. And I think that's so felt. But in all of this, there's so much nuance worth reflecting on in your own experience. Like, is this coming from judgment? Like, am I trying to get validated? Like, am I really committed to showing up and presently expressing my truth? So it's a really cool topic.
And even if it does come from judgment, right? Who the fuck cares? I think that's like another gift here is recognizing that, if I'm going to be judgmental, or let's say you are, Grace, let's say you're going to be judgmental and pissy one morning in a meeting, and, that's you. That can be you. That's just you. And that's what you're dealing with. That's your perspective on the world that day. It actually doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't really have anything to say about me. It's you. It's how you're showing up. We take this whole thing about taking everything so personally. You have a choice. You have a choice in how you want to receive what you hear. And I think that's been another huge gift here is the discipline to recognize that when that comes at you, you can look at it in one of many ways, but I think of one of sort of two ways. You can look at it as like, oh, and this is all about me, or no, this is just their perspective and they're sharing it with me. It doesn't have really anything to do with me at all. And I think when you can develop that level of detachment from both your own ego, right? And what's coming at you, that's when you can really be in the world, I think. And that's, for me, when I can do both of those things, shift my own way of thinking and how I interpret what comes at me, that's when I find the most peace. That's when I feel like I can handle anything.
One last thing. I know we're getting to the end of our time, but sometimes you won't be in a group dynamic that's incredible, like the one we were trying to create. And sometimes you will need to say something to someone and you'll feel really activated. And I had that experience recently where I really needed to give somebody feedback and I was feeling activated about it. And I wanted to point fingers and give a laundry list of things. And it was going to come from a righteous place, but I needed to give the feedback. And I really had to challenge myself to pause, create space, and commit to listening and just see what came out of my mouth instead of like coming up with this contrived way to deliver the feedback. And all of a sudden I just heard myself talking and I was like, amazing, I'm doing it. I'm just saying it. And it had managed to come out in a loving way and the person was able to receive it. But that is not uncommon, that like you might be super activated trying to tell somebody something or express a counter viewpoint. And so what I've been working on, what you might try is really just pausing and creating separation between when you decide to deliver that and just let it come out naturally, as opposed to like planning the speech and then going to deliver it, which can really go awry sometimes.
I think the pause is so, so important. And when we talk about breath, we're going to talk about the pause because that's what that really is.
I think one last thing I want to add on to the mindset piece is how you reframe your version of the truth in this moment. Like in that setting, you were saying, okay, I'm coming from a righteous place. Like I'm right, they're wrong. This is how they messed up, blah, blah, blah. And I think that even that mindset gets us like automatically zip line into conflict, because now we are in a place of defensiveness. And if someone comes at us with an opposing perspective or even experience, Sarah, this, Grace, this, but like how many relationships where you and your partner are talking about things and you're like, oh, you literally had a very different interpretation of the exact same events that just happened. And I'm trying to make you only agree with my version. And I think I'm right. And you're trying to make me agree with your version. And I think you're wrong. So I'm not open to that. But I'm a hypocrite because I want you to see my version and you just want me to see your version. So what if no one has the right version? What if we can just accept that there was two different emotional landscapes going on here and we don't need to get the other person on their side of what happened? Huge. So hard to do.
It's hard to be human.
Yeah.
That's why we got to be so disciplined and work at it. You want to be your best version of yourself. There's a lot of things you have to work on. Luckily, we have a long life to do it, most of us.
Sarah, what advice would you give someone trying to build their think piece of their stress kit? Like, what would you have? We gave them a lot of different mindset shifts, practical tools, and the feeling. Like, where would they start to start collecting the ones that are true for them?
There's a lot of wisdom out there. So I like to turn to, finding a guide, who can help me. There are two books that I think, and I was thinking about this a couple days ago. There are two books I think everybody should read annually. And there's lots of books you should read annually because there's lots of books I love, but two that I try to read every year. And the first one is The Four Agreements. And the second one is The Untethered Soul. And where should you start? Who's doing the thing you wish you could do better? How can you just be in their aura? Whether it's just listening to what they have to say, a podcast, reading something they've written, following them on Instagram. How can you just get yourself around, a friend that you just think is really nailing it, and how can you spend more time around them? I think that helps a great deal. I love to surround myself with people that are just vibing in a place where I feel like I can't vibe yet, but I want to. I want to just soak it up. Like when I wanted to get good at lifting weights, I needed to show up and find a good person who could teach me how to not hurt myself, right? It's the same kind of thing. You want to learn French? Take a French class, So this mindset stuff, there's just tons of research out there and tons of people are talking about it right now. It's such a hot topic, right? You could probably find yourself a mindset coach if you wanted to, but I don't know that you need a coach. Those 2 books would be a good place to start. And I also think cultivating a pause in your life enough that you can look at where you're not doing what you want to be doing. Because if you're not willing to actually take a hard look in the mirror at where you're falling short, what's the point of reading any of it then? And maybe you find someone who's kind of like an accountability coach, and you can like process some of the difficult moments. I don't know. There's a million different ways you could attack this, but the resources are abundant.
One thing I was thinking about, we can close after this, but
Yeah.
I just it was coming to my mind. I was thinking about it yesterday and how we underestimate the amount of time it takes to do the things that we just want to move through. We want to get that done. We underestimate how long that is going to take us. And we overestimate how much time we think we're going to have in the future. We think I'll start that habit when life gets less busy, when I have less projects to do, when I have this, when I have that. I'm not going to start working out or sleeping well or whatever until I have like a lot of time to dedicate to do it.
Yeah. It's November. I don't need to work on my beach body till March,
Mm-hmm. And it's like, newsflash, you're not going to have this boundless, endless area of time to just get to do all the things you want to do. If you want to do those things, if you want to shift your life, if you want to make those changes, it starts with the 5 minutes. It starts with that 3-minute conversation with the sadness in your throat while you're pouring water in the morning. Yeah. Like, it doesn't have to be this, I will commit to this massive program and blah, 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 blah. When I have the space in my life, you're probably not going to have the space in your life until you make the space for it. Yeah. And it starts with that little microscopic moment of pause and then continuing to add in, it's like a stolen moment, where can you get your time? Where can you take your time back for the things that are actually going to benefit you?
Right. And in turn, create more time, right? The more you do this, the more you elongate and expand time in your life. And it's really amazing.
I think that is such a critical point, Grace. And I experienced that this week in like major crisis happening, right? And not feeling stressed by it. I still had time for all the other things I needed to do. I still took care of all the other people I needed to take care of and myself. We underestimate the amount of time our busy brains consume in their fretful, worried, anxious state, and how distracting that is, how it debilitates us when we want to be productive. And when we start to quiet that, it creates so much space for so many other things.
So good.
Fun conversation.
Yes. More on the stress kit and the other pillars in future episodes. We can't wait to share more with you guys.
Yeah.